Hello, I'm Mrs. Evelyn. Welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy today's story. She spent 6 years building a man who would leave her in 6 minutes. That's how long it took Marcus to ask for the divorce. 6 minutes after walking across that stage in his cap and gown, diploma in hand, surrounded by people congratulating him on becoming a doctor. 6 minutes after she stood there clapping until her palms hurt, tears streaming down her face because she was so proud of what they had accomplished together. 6 minutes. Rachel had been awake since 4 that morning. She'd ironed his gown twice because the first time wasn't perfect enough. She'd made sure his shoes were polished, his shirt pressed, every detail exactly right for his big day. Their big day, she'd thought. The day that would finally mark the beginning of the life they'd been working toward since he was 23, and she was 22, back when they got married in a courthouse with 2 witnesses and dreams bigger than their bank account. She remembered standing in the crowd during the ceremony, watching him smile that brilliant smile she'd fallen in love with. She remembered thinking about all those nights she'd come home at midnight from her second job, finding him asleep at the kitchen table with his textbook still open. She'd cover him with a blanket, make his lunch for the next day, then wake up at 5 to get to her morning shift at the diner. 3 jobs. That's what it took to keep them afloat while he studied. Administrative assistant during the day, waitress at night, weekend work cleaning houses. Her hands were always dry and cracked. Her feet always hurt. But every time she wanted to complain, she'd remind herself why she was doing it. They were building something. They were a team. She'd given up her own dream of becoming a teacher. The money wasn't there for both of them to go to school, and Marcus had been so passionate about medicine, so certain he could help people, change lives, make a difference. She'd smiled and told him she could go back later, after he graduated, after they were stable. She meant it too. She believed in their future. 6 years of ramen noodles and thrift store clothes. 6 years of telling her friends she couldn't go out because she couldn't afford it. 6 years of her mother asking if she was okay. Really okay. Because she looked so tired all the time. 6 years of Marcus promising that once he became a doctor, everything would be different. He'd take care of her. She'd never have to work so hard again. They'd travel, buy a house, maybe start a family. She believed every word. The ceremony ended and people flooded out onto the lawn. Families clustered together, taking pictures, hugging, laughing. Rachel pushed through the crowd looking for Marcus, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She'd brought the good camera, the one she'd been saving for months to buy, just for this moment. She found him standing with some of his classmates, all of them in their graduation gowns, all of them glowing with success. When he saw her coming, something flickered across his face, something she couldn't quite read. "Marcus!" She reached for him, ready to throw her arms around him. He stepped back, just 1 step, but it might as well have been a mile. "Rachel!" His voice was different, formal, cold. "We need to talk." The smile froze on her face. Around them, his classmates suddenly found reasons to drift away, their eyes avoiding hers. She knew that look. People only looked away like that when they knew something you didn't. Something bad. "What's wrong?" Her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw it, the distance in his eyes. The way he seemed to be measuring her, finding her lacking. She'd seen him look at expired medications that way once during his pharmacy rotation. "I think we should end this," he said. "I've already talked to a lawyer. The papers are drawn up. It'll be quick and clean." The world tilted. She actually felt dizzy, like the ground was moving under her feet. "What are you talking about?" "Come on, Rachel. You had to know this was coming." He shifted his weight, impatient like she was wasting his time. We got married too young. We're different people now. Different. She almost laughed, except nothing was funny. Marcus, I've been working 3 jobs to put you through school. We've been planning our future. We talked about this last week, you said. I know what I said. He cut her off. But I've been thinking, really thinking. And the truth is, you're holding me back. Those words hit like a physical blow. Holding you back? You never finished your degree. You work as a waitress and a secretary. I'm about to start my residency at one of the best hospitals in the state. I'm going to be moving in different circles now, meeting different people. Important people. People who can help my career. He paused, and what he said next would replay in her mind for years. I need someone who can keep up with me. Someone who fits into that world. You don't. She stared at him, this man she'd sacrificed everything for, and tried to find some hint of the person she'd married. But he was looking at her like she was a stranger. Worse than a stranger. Like she was an inconvenience. I supported you, she whispered. I gave up everything. And I appreciate that. Really, I do. He said it like he was thanking her for holding a door open. That's why I'm not going to fight you on anything. You can keep whatever you want from the apartment. I'll even give you a little money to help you get started. But Rachel, it's time for both of us to move on. A little money? She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Marcus, I paid for your school. I paid for our rent, our food, everything for 6 years. You paid what you could afford. I'm the one who took out the loans. I'm the one who'll be paying them back. His tone was dismissive, final. Look, I don't want to do this here. Just sign the papers. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. She looked around at the celebration happening everywhere around them. Families taking pictures, parents crying happy tears. Someone had brought champagne. Somewhere nearby, someone was laughing. And here she stood, being discarded like trash on what was supposed to be the best day of their lives. There's someone else, isn't there? The words came out before she could stop them. He didn't deny it. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Jennifer's been in my study group. She's going into cardiology. We have a lot in common. She understands what I'm trying to build. Jennifer. Rachel knew exactly who he meant. The daughter of some hospital administrator. Pretty and polished. Who'd never had to work a day in her life. Who wore designer clothes to class and drove a car that cost more than Rachel made in a year. When? Her voice broke. How long? Does it matter? He glanced at his watch. Actually looked at his watch, like he had somewhere better to be. I have dinner reservations. We're celebrating with her family tonight. The papers are at the apartment. Just sign them and leave your key when you go. I'd appreciate it if you could be out by the end of the week. He walked away, just turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in her thrift store dress and her dollar store shoes, with the camera she'd saved for months to buy hanging useless around her neck. She watched him go, watched him find Jennifer waiting by a shiny black car, watched Jennifer kiss him while her parents looked on with approval. Watched the 4 of them drive away to celebrate his success, the success she'd built with her broken hands and her tired feet and her postponed dreams. Rachel stood there for a long time after the crowd dispersed. She stood there until the sun started to set, and the parking lot was nearly empty. Then she went back to their apartment, his apartment now, and found the divorce papers waiting on the kitchen table, right next to the bills she'd been paying for 6 years. She read through them. He'd already signed. There was a check for $5,000 paperclip to the front page. A little money to help her get started like he'd promised. 6 years of her life, $5,000. She looked around the apartment at the second-hand furniture she'd found, the curtains she'd sewn herself, the life she'd built while he studied. None of it had ever been theirs. Not really. It had all been temporary to him. She'd just been too busy working to see it. Rachel picked up the pen, and she signed her name. She didn't cry when she signed the papers. That came later, in a motel room 40 miles away, when the reality finally hit her like a wave she couldn't fight. But in that moment, standing in the kitchen of the apartment she'd worked 3 jobs to pay for, she felt something colder than sadness. Clarity. Rachel left the signed papers on the table. She took the $5,000 check. She packed 1 suitcase with clothes and a box with a few personal items. Photos of her family, books she'd loved before she stopped having time to read, the jewelry her grandmother had left her. Everything else, all that second-hand furniture and those hand-sewn curtains, she left behind. Let him have it. Let Jennifer move into the life Rachel had built and see how long gratitude lasted. She dropped her key on the counter and walked out. Didn't leave a note. Didn't say goodbye. What was there to say that he'd care about? The hardest part was calling her mother. "He did what?" Her mother's voice went sharp with anger. "Rachel Marie, you tell me where that boy lives, and I'll—" "Mom, please." Rachel was calling from a gas station payphone, her car packed with everything she owned. No idea where she was going. "I just need you to know I'm okay. I'm leaving town for a while. I need some space to think. You come home right now. You come home and we'll figure this out together." But Rachel couldn't go home. Couldn't face the looks of pity, the endless questions, the constant reminder that everyone had warned her she was giving up too much. Her mother had said it. Her friends had said it. Even her college advisor had pulled her aside once and asked if she was sure about dropping out. She'd been so sure, so certain Marcus was worth it. "I'll call you soon," she promised. "I love you." She hung up before her mother could argue. Rachel drove for 3 hours before she stopped at a small town she'd never heard of. She checked into a cheap motel and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. No calls from Marcus, no texts asking if she was okay, if she'd found somewhere to go, if she needed anything. Nothing. He'd moved on before he'd even left her. That night, lying in the dark in a strange room, Rachel made herself a promise. She wasn't going to fall apart. She wasn't going to let this destroy her. Marcus had called her deadweight, had looked at her like she was worthless, like 6 years of sacrifice meant nothing. She was going to prove him wrong. The next morning, she cashed his check and opened a new bank account in a different town. She found a room to rent in a house owned by an elderly woman who asked no questions. She got a job at a medical supply company doing data entry. It wasn't much, but it was stable. And for the first time in 6 years, she only had to work 1 job. At night, she started studying again. She'd never finished her degree, but she still had most of her credits. She enrolled in online classes, business administration this time, instead of education. Something practical, something that would open doors. She worked during the day, studied at night, and slowly, painfully, started to rebuild herself. The first year was the hardest. She'd catch herself reaching for her phone to call Marcus about something funny that happened at work, then remember he wasn't hers to call anymore. She'd see medical shows on TV and have to change the channel. She'd hear a song they used to like and feel that hollow ache in her chest. But she kept going. She finished her bachelor's degree in 18 months, taking as many classes as she could handle while working full-time. Then she started her MBA. The woman who owned the house she rented, Mrs. Chen, would bring her tea while she studied and tell her she reminded her of her own daughter. "You're going to do something important," Mrs. Chen said once. "I can tell. You've got that look, like you're not studying to pass a test. You're studying like you're building something." She was right. Rachel was building something. Brick by brick, class by class, she was constructing a new life from the ruins of the old one. She changed her name back to her maiden name, Porter. Rachel Porter. Rachel Winters had died the day Marcus handed her those divorce papers. This was someone new, someone stronger, someone who would never again sacrifice herself for someone else's dreams. During her second year away, her phone rang with an unknown number. Her heart jumped. For one stupid, hopeful second, she thought maybe Marcus was calling to apologize, to say he'd made a mistake. It wasn't Marcus. "Is this Rachel Porter?" A woman's voice, professional. "Yes." "This is Amanda Chen, calling from the estate of Helen Chen. I'm her granddaughter. I'm sorry to inform you that my grandmother passed away last week." Rachel felt like she'd been punched. Mrs. Chen, who'd given her a place to stay when she had nowhere to go, who'd brought her tea and called her dear and told her she was going to do something important. "I'm so sorry," Rachel managed. "She was a wonderful woman. She was, and she thought very highly of you. She left you something in her will." Rachel didn't understand. "She left me something?" "Her business. The medical supply distribution company she owned. The one where you work." The room spun. "I'm sorry, what?" "She owned med supply distribution. She started it 40 years ago with my grandfather. She'd been looking for someone to take it over, someone who understood the business and would treat her employees right. She chose you. If you want it, it's yours. There are conditions. You have to keep the staff on for at least 2 years, maintain the company values she established, things like that. But the business itself, all of it, she's leaving it to you." Rachel couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The data entry job she'd taken to survive, the company she'd been working for, it had been Mrs. Chen's all along, and now it was hers. "Ms. Porter, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'll do it. I'll honor her wishes." "Good. I'll have the lawyers contact you with the details." After she hung up, Rachel sat in silence for a long time. Then she went to Mrs. Chen's room, the one that had been left exactly as it was, and she cried. Not for Marcus this time. For the woman who'd seen something in her when she couldn't see it herself. The company was smaller than she'd thought. 12 employees, steady but not spectacular revenue. A lot of potential that hadn't been developed. Rachel threw herself into it completely. She used everything she was learning in her MBA program and applied it in real time. She streamlined operations, expanded their product line, built relationships with new suppliers and clients. The company started to grow. Within a year, she'd doubled their revenue. Within 2 years, she'd opened a second location. The employees who'd known her as the quiet data entry girl were now calling her Ms. Porter and asking her advice on how to improve their departments. She was building an empire from the ashes of her old life. 3 years after Marcus had handed her those divorce papers, Rachel's company had grown into something significant. They'd expanded into medical equipment leasing, started providing supplies to hospitals and clinics across 3 states. She'd hired smart people, treated them well, and built a reputation for reliability and quality. And then one day, her VP of acquisitions came to her office with a folder. "There's a clinic that's struggling financially," he said. "Silver Lake Medical Group. They're overextended, behind on payments to their suppliers, including us. The owner wants to retire and is looking to sell before the whole thing goes under. The location is prime, right in the medical district. If we bought it, converted it into a flagship location for our equipment leasing program, it could be huge. Rachel took the folder. She wasn't that interested. Clinics weren't really their business, but she opened it anyway. And there, in the list of current employees, she saw a name that made her blood run cold. Dr. Marcus Winters. She stared at that name for a long time. Then she looked at the address, the medical district, the good area, where important people worked. The place Marcus had been so eager to join when he'd thrown her away. Ms. Porter, should I set up a meeting with the owner? Rachel thought about that day 3 years ago. The graduation ceremony, the 6 minutes that had destroyed her life. Marcus's voice saying she was holding him back, that she'd never fit into his world, that she was dead weight. She thought about Jennifer, whoever she was now, whether she was still around or if Marcus had traded her in too. She thought about every sacrifice she'd made, every night she'd worked until her hands bled, every dream she'd postponed so he could have his. Yes, she said quietly. Set up the meeting. I want that clinic. Her VP smiled. I'll get right on it. After he left, Rachel pulled up everything she could find about Silver Lake Medical Group. It wasn't hard to piece together the story. The clinic had been successful once, but poor management had run it into the ground. They'd expanded too fast, taken on too much debt, made bad investments. Now they were desperate. And Marcus worked there. Just an employee, not a partner. Not the important doctor moving in important circles. Just another physician on staff, probably drowning in student loan debt, probably not living the glamorous life he'd imagined. Rachel leaned back in her chair. She could walk away. She could buy a different property, expand in a different direction, never think about Marcus Winters again. But that wouldn't be justice. She picked up her phone and called her VP back. Schedule the meeting, she said. And make sure it happens fast. I want to close this deal within 2 weeks. The purchase went through in 10 days. The owner of Silver Lake Medical Group was so desperate to sell that he barely negotiated. Rachel paid a fair price. She wasn't interested in taking advantage, even of a failing business. She was interested in something else entirely. During the entire process, she kept her involvement quiet. Her lawyers handled the paperwork. Her VP managed the communications. The staff at Silver Lake had no idea who was buying their clinic. They just knew someone was, and that their jobs were probably safe, at least for now. Rachel spent those 10 days preparing. She reviewed every file, every contract, every employee record. She learned the names of the nurses, the administrative staff, the other doctors. She studied the clinic's problems, identified what needed to change, made plans for how to turn it around. And she read Marcus's file over and over again. He'd finished his residency 3 years ago, just like he'd planned. He'd worked at 2 other practices before Silver Lake. The first one had let him go after a year. The file didn't say why. But reading between the lines, Rachel guessed personality conflicts. The second one he'd left on his own after 18 months. Now he'd been at Silver Lake for a year and a half. He was competent, but not exceptional. Good patient reviews. Nothing outstanding. He made a decent salary, but nothing like what he'd probably imagined when he was walking across that graduation stage. He was average, replaceable. The file didn't mention Jennifer. Rachel didn't know if they'd gotten married, broken up, or if he'd moved on to someone else. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Marcus had thrown her away to pursue a life he thought would be better, and now she was about to walk into that life as the person who owned it. The day of the staff meeting, Rachel dressed carefully. A navy blue suit, professional and expensive but not flashy. Her hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. She looked like exactly what she was, a successful businesswoman who'd built something from nothing. She drove to Silver Lake Medical Group and sat in her car for a moment, looking at the building. This was the medical district Marcus had been so eager to be part of. These were the important circles he'd wanted to move in, and now she owned a piece of it. She got out of the car and walked inside. The receptionist looked up with a professional smile. "Can I help you?" "Rachel Porter. I'm here for the staff meeting." The smile faltered slightly. Oh, Ms. Porter. Yes, of course. Everyone's gathering in the conference room. I'll show you." Rachel followed her down a hallway lined with examination rooms. She could hear voices ahead, the low murmur of confused staff wondering what was happening, why they'd all been called in on a Friday afternoon. The receptionist opened the conference room door. "Ms. Porter is here." The room fell silent. There were about 20 people gathered. Nurses, administrative staff, medical assistants, and 4 doctors. Rachel's eyes swept across the room professionally, cataloguing faces, and then stopped. There he was, Marcus sitting near the back looking older than she remembered. Still handsome, but there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a tightness to his mouth. He was looking at his phone, barely paying attention. He didn't recognize her, not yet. Why would he? The last time he'd seen her, she'd been tired and broken, wearing a thrift store dress. Now she looked like someone who belonged in a boardroom. Rachel walked to the front of the room. Her VP was there, along with her director of operations and 2 lawyers. They'd been managing the transition, but this part, the introduction, this was hers. "Good afternoon, everyone." Her voice was steady, calm, professional. "I'm Rachel Porter, CEO of Med Supply Distribution. As of this morning, I'm also the new owner of Silver Lake Medical Group." The murmur that went through the room was expected. People glancing at each other, worried about what this meant for their jobs, their future. "I know you're all concerned about what changes this will bring. Let me start by saying that I've reviewed this clinic's operations, and I see a lot of potential. You have good people here, dedicated staff, and with the right leadership and resources, this can be one of the premier medical facilities in the district." She paused, letting that sink in. People were starting to relax slightly. This didn't sound like someone who was about to fire everyone. "However," Rachel continued, "part of building something successful means making sure we have the right team in place. People who are committed to excellence, who treat their colleagues with respect, who understand that we succeed together." That's when Marcus looked up from his phone. Their eyes met across the room, and she watched the recognition hit him like a physical blow. His face went white. His mouth actually fell open. She saw him mouth her name silently. "Rachel!" Like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. She didn't smile, didn't acknowledge him, just kept talking. "Over the next few weeks, my team will be meeting with each of you individually to discuss your roles and how we can support your growth within the organization. We'll be making some structural changes, updating equipment, and implementing new systems. For most of you, this is going to be a positive change." She paused again, and this time she did let her gaze settle on Marcus. He was staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. The color had drained from his face completely. "For some of you, however, this will be the end of your time at Silver Lake." The room went tense. Rachel pulled out a single sheet of paper from the folder her VP handed her. "Dr. Marcus Winters, please stand up." For a moment he didn't move, just sat there frozen, staring at her. Then slowly, mechanically, he stood. Everyone in the room was looking at him now, confused, uncomfortable. "Dr. Winters," Rachel said, her voice perfectly professional, perfectly cold. I've reviewed your employment record here at Silver Lake. I've also taken the time to speak with staff members from your previous positions. That wasn't entirely true, but she'd read enough in his file to know what kind of doctor he was, what kind of colleague, what kind of person. What I've found is a pattern of behavior that doesn't align with the values I expect in this organization. Multiple complaints from nurses about dismissive treatment, patient reviews noting a lack of empathy, colleagues describing you as difficult to work with and more concerned with status than with patient care. Marcus's face had gone from white to red. That's not... You can't just... I can, actually. Rachel's voice didn't rise, didn't waver. As the owner of this clinic, I can make decisions about who represents our organization and our values, and I've decided that you don't. She pulled out an envelope and handed it to her VP, who walked it over to Marcus. You're terminated, effective immediately. That envelope contains your final paycheck, information about COBRA benefits, and a severance package that is more than generous given the circumstances. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings and leave the premises. The room was dead silent. Someone coughed. A nurse near the front looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Marcus took the envelope with shaking hands. He was staring at Rachel like he still couldn't process what was happening. You, he said finally, his voice hoarse. You did all this? You bought? I built a successful business, Dr. Winters. Something I managed to do without anyone's help, without sacrificing anyone else's dreams, without treating people like they're dead weight the moment they're no longer useful to me. The words hung in the air. She saw the moment he understood, really understood. This wasn't just a business decision. This was everything, coming full circle. Rachel, his voice cracked. Can we talk? Privately, please? We have nothing to discuss. You have 58 minutes remaining. I made a mistake. The words came out desperate now, his professional facade crumbling. I was young and stupid, and I didn't appreciate what I had. I've thought about you so many times, wondered where you were, if you were okay. Were you thinking about me when you asked for a divorce at your graduation? When you told me I was holding you back? When you gave me $5,000 like that would cover 6 years of my life? The room was so quiet Rachel could hear someone's watch ticking. Marcus's mouth opened and closed. I was an idiot. I know that now. Things didn't work out the way I thought they would. Jennifer and I. It didn't last. Nothing has been what I expected. I've wanted to reach out so many times, but I didn't know how to find you. Good. Rachel cut him off. That was intentional. I didn't want to be found, not by you. She turned to address the rest of the room, dismissing him as thoroughly as he'd once dismissed her. For everyone else, welcome to the new Silver Lake Medical Group. I'm excited about what we're going to build here together. You'll be hearing from HR about next steps. Meeting adjourned. People started to file out slowly, shooting glances at Marcus, at Rachel, clearly unsure what they'd just witnessed. The nurses were whispering to each other. One of the other doctors touched Marcus's shoulder, said something Rachel couldn't hear. Marcus didn't move. He stood there holding the envelope, looking at Rachel like she was someone he'd never met. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry. Rachel gathered her papers, put them back in her folder. When she finally looked at him, her expression was calm, almost kind. You know what's interesting, Marcus. I spent a year being angry at you. Another year feeling worthless because of what you said to me. And then I spent the last year building something I could be proud of. And somewhere in all that, I stopped caring about your apology." She walked toward the door, then paused. "You called me dead weight, said I couldn't keep up with you, that I didn't fit into your world. But here's what you never understood. I wasn't dead weight. I was the foundation. And when you kicked out the foundation, you had nothing left to build on. That's why you ended up here, average and unhappy, while I ended up owning the building." She left him standing there. Her VP caught up with her in the hallway. "That was intense. That was necessary," Rachel said. "Make sure security escorts him out after the hour is up, and have HR start interviews for his replacement next week. I want someone who actually cares about patients, not just status." "Already on it." Rachel walked out of Silver Lake Medical Group with her head high, got in her car, and drove back to her office. She had work to do, a business to run, a clinic to turn around. She didn't look back. That night, Rachel sat in her office long after everyone else had gone home. The city lights spread out below her windows. She'd moved the company headquarters downtown 6 months ago, to a building with a view that reminded her every day how far she'd come. She thought she'd feel different after confronting Marcus. Triumphant, maybe. Satisfied. Instead, she felt quiet. Calm. Like she'd finally closed a door that had been hanging open for 3 years, letting in a cold draft she'd gotten so used to, she'd stopped noticing it was there. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Call me when you can. I know something big happened today. A mother knows." Rachel smiled. She'd reconnected with her family about a year ago, once she'd rebuilt enough of herself to face their concern without breaking down. Her mother had cried when she'd heard everything Rachel had accomplished, had said she was proud, so proud, had always known her daughter was strong enough to survive anything. She called. "So?" her mother said immediately. "Tell me." Rachel told her. Everything. The clinic purchase, the staff meeting, Marcus's face when he realized who she was, the way his voice had cracked when he'd called her name. Her mother was silent for a long moment after she finished. Then, "How do you feel?" "Honestly, empty. Not in a bad way, just empty. Like I've been carrying something heavy for so long that now that I've put it down, I don't know what to do with my hands." "That's grief leaving," her mother said softly. "You've been grieving that marriage longer than you were actually in it. Maybe now you can finally let it go." After they hung up, Rachel sat with those words. Grief leaving. Maybe that's what this was. The next few weeks at Silver Lake were intense. Rachel threw herself into restructuring the clinic, fixing the problems that had driven it into debt. She replaced outdated equipment, renegotiated supplier contracts, brought in a new practice manager who actually understood healthcare operations. She met with every staff member personally, learned their concerns, listened to their ideas. The nurses who'd worked under Marcus opened up to her carefully, testing to see if she was really listening. They told her about patients he'd rushed through, about his dismissive attitude, about the way he'd treated them like servants instead of colleagues. One of them, an older woman named Patricia, pulled Rachel aside after a meeting. "I don't know what history you have with Dr. Winters," Patricia said carefully. "But whatever it is, thank you. He wasn't a bad doctor exactly. But he didn't belong in medicine. He was in it for the wrong reasons." Rachel thought about that. Marcus had seemed so passionate about medicine when they'd first gotten married, so determined to help people. But somewhere along the way, maybe even before they'd met, it had become about something else. Status, money, prestige. The passion had been an act, or maybe it had died, and he'd kept going because he'd invested too much to quit. She wondered if he'd ever been happy. 3 weeks after she'd fired him, Rachel got an email. The subject line was simple. "Please read." She almost deleted it. Her finger hovered over the button. But curiosity won. The email was long, rambling. Marcus apologizing again, trying to explain himself, saying he understood if she never forgave him, but he needed her to know that losing her had been the biggest mistake of his life, that Jennifer had left him after a year, that his career hadn't turned out the way he'd imagined, that he'd been drowning in debt and disappointment and regret, that seeing what she'd become had made him realize what he'd thrown away. Rachel read it twice. Then she drafted a response. "Marcus, I appreciate the apology. I do. But you need to understand something. I didn't do any of this because of you. I didn't build my company to show you up. I didn't buy Silver Lake to get revenge. I built a life because that's what people do when their old life falls apart. They survive. They adapt. They become someone new. You were a chapter in my story, but you're not the story. You never were. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I hope you figure out who you are when you're not trying to impress anyone. I hope you become someone you can be proud of. But I'm done carrying you. I'm done thinking about what you did to me. I'm done letting you take up space in my head. This is goodbye, Marcus. For real this time. Take care of yourself. Rachel." She sent it and blocked his email address. Then she archived the entire conversation and got back to work. Silver Lake Medical Group turned around faster than anyone expected. Within 6 months, it was profitable. Within a year, it had a waiting list of patients. Rachel hired 3 new doctors. All of them came highly recommended. All of them passionate about patient care. None of them interested in status games. She promoted Patricia to head nurse and gave her the authority to speak up if she ever saw doctors treating staff poorly. She implemented a profit-sharing program so everyone benefited when the clinic succeeded. She created a culture where people wanted to work, where they felt valued, and slowly, without really planning it, Rachel became known in the medical community. Not as someone's ex-wife, not as the woman who'd sacrificed everything for a man who'd thrown her away, but as a businesswoman who understood healthcare, who treated people fairly, who built things that lasted. She dated occasionally, nothing serious. She wasn't sure if she'd ever want to get married again, and that was okay. She had a business she loved, friends she trusted, a relationship with her family that had healed and grown stronger. She had a life that was entirely her own. 2 years after she'd bought Silver Lake, Rachel was invited to speak at a healthcare conference about building successful medical practices. She almost said no. Public speaking wasn't really her thing. But her VP convinced her it would be good for business. She stood on that stage in front of 300 people and told her story. Not all of it. She didn't mention Marcus by name, didn't air that private pain publicly. But she talked about rebuilding after loss, about turning pain into purpose, about how sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you can become the catalyst for the best thing you'll ever do. "Someone once told me I was dead weight," she said near the end of her speech, "that I was holding them back from their dreams. And for a long time, I believed it. I thought maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I'd never be enough. But here's what I learned. When someone treats you like you're worthless, that tells you who they are, not who you are. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see it. I built something from nothing. I took $5,000 and a broken heart, and I turned it into a multi-million-dollar company. I took a failing clinic and made it thrive. I did that, not because I was trying to prove someone wrong, but because I decided to prove something to myself. that I was worth more than I'd been treated, that I deserved better than I'd accepted. That dead weight doesn't build empires. The applause when she finished was thunderous. Afterward, people came up to her with questions, with their own stories of rebuilding, with thanks for being honest about how hard it had been. A young woman, maybe 25, waited until everyone else had left. "I'm in a relationship," she said quietly. "And I'm putting him through grad school, working 2 jobs so he can focus on his studies. And lately he's been distant, critical. My friends say I should leave, but I keep thinking it'll get better once he graduates." Rachel looked at this young woman and saw herself at 22, so full of hope, so willing to sacrifice. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said gently. "When you talk about your future together, does he light up? Does he talk about we and us and what you'll build together? Or does he talk about what he's going to do, where he's going to go, who he's going to become?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "He talks about his future, not ours." Rachel took her hand. "Then you already know what you need to do. I can't tell you to leave. That's your choice. But I can tell you that love is supposed to be a partnership. You should never have to sacrifice yourself completely for someone else's dream. The right person will want to build a dream with you, not on top of you." The woman nodded, wiping her eyes. "How did you know when it was time to let go?" "When I realized I was holding on to who I wanted him to be, not who he actually was. When I understood that I couldn't love him into loving me back, when it hurt more to stay than to leave." Rachel gave her a business card. "If you ever need advice or just someone to talk to who's been there, call me." The woman clutched the card like a lifeline. "Thank you. Really, thank you." Watching her walk away, Rachel felt something shift inside her chest. For 3 years she'd thought her story was about revenge, about proving Marcus wrong, about showing him what he'd lost. But it wasn't about him at all. It was about a woman who'd been broken and decided to rebuild, who'd been told she was worthless and decided to prove it wrong, who'd lost everything and found herself instead. It was about survival, about strength, about learning that sometimes the people who hurt you are actually doing you a favor. They're forcing you to become who you were always meant to be. Rachel went home that night to her apartment, a real one this time, with furniture she'd chosen and curtains she'd bought, in a building she could afford, without working herself to death. She poured a glass of wine, sat on her balcony, and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Marcus was living his life. Maybe he'd found happiness. Maybe he was still searching for it. It didn't matter anymore. She'd wasted enough time thinking about him. She pulled out her phone and texted her mother. "I'm okay. Really, truly okay. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Her mother's response came immediately. "I never doubted it for a second, sweetheart. I'm so proud of who you've become." Rachel smiled, finished her wine, and went inside. She had an early meeting tomorrow, a potential acquisition, a new opportunity, another piece of the empire she was building. Not for revenge, not to prove anything to anyone, but for herself. Because she could, because she'd earned it. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so full and so rich that the person who broke you becomes nothing more than a footnote in your story. A chapter you survived, a lesson you learned, a version of yourself you outgrew. Marcus had called her dead weight on the day that was supposed to be their triumph. But in the end she'd flown higher without him than she ever could have, with him holding her down. And that was the only justice she needed. In the end, life gave her the justice she never thought she'd see. Not because she destroyed the man who hurt her, but because she built something he could never touch. because she learned that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And the best way to win isn't to make someone lose. It's to stop playing their game entirely and create your own. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Thank you for listening. See you soon.